In this video, we're going to try and find the domain for this multivariable function. So if you punch this into a graphical plotter, it will then give you this surface. So when you're trying to find the domain for this function, try to find out when this whole thing will break down. Well, it will break down when x equals 0. So just at the back of your mind, just bear in mind that x cannot be 0. The minute x is 0, then the whole thing will break down. So we know so far that x cannot be 0. And also we need to demand that this thing here, we need to make this demand. We need to demand that this thing must be greater or equal to 0. Because square root looks like this, the domain for the square root. Well, this thing needs to be greater or equal to 0. So we need to make this demand. We need to make this demand. And we can't simply multiply both sides by x because x can be negative or it can be positive. If you multiply by a negative, then you've got to switch the inequality around. So when it comes to a rational inequality, we've got to consider two scenarios. One scenario is when x is greater than 0. So one scenario is when x is greater than 0, and the other scenario when x is less than 0. So let's just look at this scenario for the time being. So we are considering on this side only. Ignore the negative. Ignore the negative. Okay, so let's just consider the right hand side. So when x is greater than 0, we then when x is positive, now we can multiply both sides by x, and then this thing won't need to switch around. So multiply both sides by x, because we now know that x is greater than 0. It will be positive. It won't be negative. So we can now multiply both sides by x. So from here, if you consider x to be positive, then you can multiply both sides by x. So that will then give us this, because 0 times x would be 0. So now we want to get y on its own. So take away x squared from both sides. That will then give us this. So what that means is when you consider x being greater than 0, which means you're considering the right hand side, y needs to be bigger or equal to negative x squared. So that's this region here. So that's this region here, not this one here. Okay, because y has to be bigger or equal to negative x squared. So we know that this is the domain, and now let's consider the scenario where x is on the left hand side, when x is less than 0. So when x is less than 0, multiply both sides by x, but because we know that x is negative, then we need to switch the inequality around. So that will then give us this. So now make y the subject. So take y x squared. That will then give us this. So what that means is on the left hand side here, y needs to be less than or equal to negative x squared. And then if you think about it, it will be this region here. So the domain is actually this weird looking thing here. This thing here plus this thing here. So that's our domain here. Alternatively, you could just cheat and punch this into Desmos. So you can simply go to desmos.com, punch this in, and it will give you this thing here, which is what we've just worked out. So the domain is given by this thing here. So the domain is this. The domain is that x and y belongs on the plane, such that in the case where x is bigger than 0, y must be bigger or equal to negative x squared. So we are now talking about this region here, and then union with xy being in the plane, such that in the case where x is less than 0, we need to demand that y is less than or equal to negative x squared, which is this region here. So you can write the domain as this. Okay, so what that means is this. going back to our graph, our surface, the domain is given by this. So what that means is, well, the x-axis is this. So in this diagram, if you look at this, the red line is the x-axis. So our x-axis is actually, hang on, our x-axis is actually along here. This is our x-axis. So that's this x-axis here. The y-axis is this thing here, which you can't see, is around the back. That's this bit here. And then the z-axis is straight up. That's the z-axis. And then if you look, well, you can see that here's our negative x squared. That's the negative x squared here. So yeah, that's a negative x squared here. So hang on, let me think. So don't forget, this is our y here. So the origin is right here. Just bear that in mind. Hang on. So this is this here is our x-axis. This here is our y-axis. So this is our negative x squared. And then hang on, let me think. You see, around this region here, there's nothingness. That's this bit around the back here. I don't know if you can visualize this, but around the back here, there's nothingness around the back. That's this region here. And then you've got your, if you look at your quadrant here, hang on. So there is something along here, which is this bit here. That is this bit here. So hang on, let's start again here. So you've got your cross here. So you've got your cross here, and then there's a small bit here, which is this bit here, and the rest here. Well, I hope you can see it. This blank bit here is actually this region here. There's nothing here, and then up here in this quadrant here, there's actually nothing. That's this quadrant around the back here. It's hard to, if you stare at it long enough, you can actually see that it kind of makes sense. There is nothing around here, which is nothing at the back, and there's nothing here, and there's nothing in this region here. Well, stare at it and hopefully you can see. Okay.